And I'm a big believer that businesses don't die. The entrepreneurs kill them. And a lot of the times they die because of foolish mistakes or being impatient as an entrepreneur.
They say it's lonely at the top. They're right. But you don't have to scale your company alone. Welcome to the Scaling CEO. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. On this podcast, I sit down with top performing CEOs to uncover the hidden patterns and frameworks behind their success so you can avoid common pitfalls and accelerate your company's growth. Now, on to the show. My guest today is Ryan Austin, a true serial entrepreneur who's been building and scaling companies since his university dorm room. He's a founder who's seen it all: bootstrapping, venture backing, and successful exits. After building and selling a consulting firm and a unique hardware company, he turned his focus to a massive problem in the corporate world. Today, Ryan is the founder and CEO of Cognota, the world's first Learn Ops platform. He's not just building a company, he's creating an entire category, aiming to do for learning and development what DevOps did for engineering and marketing ops did for marketing. His vision is to make corporate learning as strategic and data-driven as finance. As a Forbes contributor and a mentor to other entrepreneurs, Ryan has a unique perspective on what it takes to scale. He's here to share the hard-won lessons from a career spent building from the ground up. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
You founded 5 companies, if I have that right, starting with one in your dorm room. You've bootstrapped, you've raised money, you've exited. Looking back at all those different scaling journeys, what's the one insight you have now that would have saved you, your younger self, a massive amount of time and effort?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one that unfortunately I think about a lot because of the pains of not doing that. And so as you grow more scar tissue in entrepreneurship, you look back at like what are the things I wouldn't have done, but those are also the things that got you here. So you got
Right.
to appreciate them at the end of the day. The biggest thing would be patience. You hear about a lot of the overnight success stories or the companies like Deal or others that caught a big tailwind in the market and just skyrocketed. And
Right.
when you're younger and you're hungry for that type of success, you think that success is determined only on that versus a lot of times it could take 5 or 10 years or more to build $1 billion valued company. And so, I think Docebo, which is in our space, is a good example of that, where a school teacher built a learning management system, and it took them like 10 years to break through the $1 million AR mark. And then once they did that, they started to get to scale, but it took them the first 10 years to figure that out. And that's more of the norm success story that you hear about in technology companies. So the the younger Ryan, I wish, had those insights, because that company I started in my dorm room actually did really well. It generated $10,000 in its first week of launch, but because
Nice.
it didn't do $1 million within its first year, I thought that it was just a bad business, and I killed it without having uh, the insights that this was actually very successful and you should keep going. So just not having that knowledge and the right expectations hurt that business. And I'm a big believer that businesses don't die. The entrepreneurs kill them. And a lot of the times they die because of foolish mistakes or being impatient as an entrepreneur.
It's a great message right now because I listen to many CEOs talking about, well, what about Lovable and Replit and these companies that are hitting $100 million in revenue in less than a year? How come my company isn't like that? And those show up, and those are such a tiny, tiny percentage of the companies that are successful, that if we're going to be in a company that isn't going to take off like that, that doesn't mean we can't have an incredibly successful company if we're patient, like you said, and if we learn as we go along the way. So that's a great great lesson. Let me ask you another question. Let's think of it as a lesson for CEOs who are listening. What's the biggest blind spot you see in CEOs who are trying to grow? Where do they consistently get it wrong, in your opinion?
Alignment and leadership.
Tell
So
us more.
yeah, as you're growing and you're in the weeds, especially as a small team who has big ambitions, you're always thinking about moving forward, and you're not taking the time to take a step back to think about what just happened as we move forward. What were the lessons learned? How do we realign and reapply? So, what happens when you start moving quickly, especially with a leadership team, is that things start to break and everybody starts to have different ideas and things get chaotic and there's chaos in the mix. But most companies don't take the time to focus on that chaos. And all it takes is when you start missing goals, or even if you're celebrating successes because you crushed the quarter, just means taking a couple days to do that offsite and being brave enough and vulnerable enough as a leadership team to talk about the ugly stuff. And this
Uh,
is very exhausting and tiring for a CEO because everybody points the finger. This was Ryan's fault, or this is the CEO's fault. And you kind of got to take it on the chin. But once you spend a full day talking about the ugly stuff and how we can get better at doing those things and getting to the truth that will make us better, then the magic starts happening where you start building back up fully aligned to execute the next quarter, focused on the truth, focused on the areas of ugliness that we're going to fix together as a fully aligned leadership team. And it's a really powerful thing that most people, especially startups, forget to do.
yeah, it's I'm a true believer in a quarterly planning process. Do the quarterly planning process, then go execute for 90 days. And what you point out is very powerful. Let's not just do planning, but let's do an assessment of what we learned from last quarter. Let's do a postmortem. Let's learn from all those mistakes, or as you call it, the ugliness that occurred, so that we get better every single quarter. So that's a great perspective. Now,
Yeah.
you wrote on Forbes that your vision is to make learning operations as strategic and data driven as finance and marketing. So that's a bold statement. So for the leader who's listening right now, the learning and development leader who feels stuck in a reactive, let's call it order taker role, what's the first concrete step they can take to start operating more strategically?
Yeah. Um, to start with no, always. Meaning, you, if you're a leader of a learning function, a talent development function, an HR function, that whole people business, they all have this problem. It's not just learning and development. And you'll see some like really exciting updates from Cognota about that in the months to come. But to answer your question specifically about learning and development, it's not that these are bad business people, right? Or that they're order takers. They just have the infrastructure set up wrong on how to think about the business function. And it just starts with basic house rules if you're in a position to be a business leader or even in a position to be a business professional, which is if you work for a company, so an enterprise or a for-profit company, might be different for a nonprofit that is backed by mission and doesn't look at profits as being, one of the key drivers. But if you're an enterprise or corporation and you've been selected to help um, build business value uh, as a professional, that means you have a fiduciary responsibility, like everybody else, to make good investments for the business. That means good investments with time and good investments with money, right? So if your CEO stands on stage and says, these are the three most important initiatives for us next year, and the following year, we need to focus on these two other initiatives. And that's the goal. And I need everybody to align on that because I'm losing sleep over these things. and you go and work on anything else outside of those five areas that your CEO stood up, took the time to stand up on stage about, say they're losing sleep about it, and they need your help to accomplish these. And if you accomplish it, there's going to be greatness on the other side. And you do anything else with your time or your money than those five things, then you're failing automatically as a business professional or a business leader. So the first rule of thumb is to learn how to say no to business partners when they're asking you, and you're accountable to this, to spend your own time and your own money on things that might not align to the business goals because they woke up one day and said, I think we need to do this. I'm going to go and talk to Ryan, who is a pushover, and ask Ryan to do this. Now, I have a lot of empathy for L&D, which is why I've dedicated a good portion of my life to this mission, which is the reality is their job is really hard. On one end, they need to own a part of the corporate strategy and create capability and enablement or enablement programs to upskill the company to actually achieve these business goals. But on the other side, by default, they like helping people. And their mission is to help the workforce do better. So it's easy to say not to be a pushover and to start with no, but by default they're looking at performance improvement, and so they want to say yes. So another way to look at it is always you can say yes, but where you can offer help, but you shouldn't be saying yes with your time and your money on things that won't drive impact for the business. Because if you say yes to that, you've committed money and time, and now you're responsible for delivering those results. And if it's not aligned to the business impact to begin with, you're going to have poor ROI and looked at poorly as a business leader.
That's a great way to think about things, not just from the CEO's perspective, but how you communicate to the rest of the team. When we were talking earlier about a 90-day sprint, if you will, and that quarterly planning, when you walk out of the quarterly planning, you say, as you said, here are the things we're going to focus on. Here are the things we're going to go accomplish. But that also means sometimes you need to be explicit to your leadership team. Do not work on that. Or as you said, say no to that. We might revisit it later, but we've already gone through an exercise to determine what's most important. We need to focus there. So I agree with you very much on that point. So Ryan, you've gone from a journey of bootstrapping a consulting firm to now running a venture-backed SaaS company. Those are two totally different worlds. How did you have to scale yourself as a leader to succeed in this new environment? What old habits did you have to kill?
Again, I think in order to meet growth objectives and to grow as a person, you have to be extremely vulnerable, and you have to build a culture of trust and feedback loops where your leadership team feels empowered that they can come back to you and share openly where they think you can work better with them, right? And so at different levels of the business, as you hire different people, those are opportunities for CEOs to continue to scale back. For example, you might have seen 2 days ago, we announced that we hired a chief revenue officer at Cognota.
Congratulations.
Um, thank you. And today we had our weekly sales strategy meeting, and which I showed up to it. And I waited until the end of the meeting, but at the end of the meeting, I said, hey team, I don't know if you still want me here in this meeting anymore. I'm happy to do it and be here. Or you can delete me off of the invite and invite me into these meetings when you think I can add value to the team and, to be part of your mission. And the response was, bye. So that was great because it was a growth moment for Cognota where, I can continue to step back as we continue to hire the right people and build forward moving value in the company.
Well, I congratulate you for actually asking that question because sometimes from an ego standpoint, it's hard for CEOs to realize I'm not needed here. And in fact, my job is done for the most part because I brought the right people in to run a particular function. So congratulations on that.
Thanks. I do have one more point on that,
Sure.
which is the flip side. So before having the chief revenue officer start, we had a revenue advisor working with us to help us understand when is the right time to bring on a full-time leader in this position. And together we decided now. However, he has a different a theory on this, which is when leaders come into the company, there's this saying about hire good people and get out of the way.
Hmm.
And his perspective is it's instead of that's a pizza like this. And the reality is you should flip it like this, which means you come in and at the top of the pizza you have the pepperoni slices, that are wide. That's your frontline people. If you want me to trust you and get out of the way, you have to prove and build trust with me. I think I trusted you because I hired you, I did references, etc.
Right.
But now we're actually partnering. You have to show me that you have the leadership capabilities to drive performance up to the bottom of that pizza because it's flipped upside down.
Hmm.
And if you do that, I'm happy to step back and get out of the way. But if it's not going right, don't ask me not to get in the weeds because my job is to get in the weeds to make sure that the company is healthy.
That's right.
And that changed my mind a little bit on how to look at this because the most anxiety I've ever had is when you did your homework, you hired a leader, and it just didn't end up being the right partnership. But because you want to get out of the way, it creates friction and anxiety, and it's totally avoidable.
And it's a matter of time frame also. One of the things I coach CEOs on is, let's say somebody else hires their new chief revenue officer. What I say to them is, don't just sit back and congratulate yourself for having hired the chief revenue officer. We don't know if this person is going to work yet. And in fact, if you're a stellar hiring organization, you get it right about 80% of the time, which means there's a 20% failure rate. So we want to look very closely and work very closely with any new individual for the first 90 days to ensure they are delivering the way we expect them to, or hopefully better. And if they're not, we want to make a course correction immediately. And I also say keep a pipeline of other candidates out there just in case this is one of those times, those 20 percenters where it didn't work out. So let's shift to a very important topic for you and all of us who are listening, and that's AI. So I'm really fascinated in the world of learn ops. How does AI fit in? Because now you have a whole world of competition that didn't exist just 2 years ago, where people might be able to learn on their own. But even OpenAI is now creating an OpenAI Academy where people can learn certain categories of technologies or functions even. So talk to us about what you're doing and how do you protect or create a moat so that we want to rely on Cognota for our learning ops.
Yeah, so learn ops by definition is operations or learning operations. And operations isn't the actual learning or the delivery of the learning or the content creation whatsoever. It's the foundation back uh, back office elements on how do you run your learning function to best practices in operational excellence. So Cognota actually does nothing when it comes to content creation or content delivery.
Mhm.
We leave that up to the authoring tools, and there's a lot of AI in that element. We leave that to the learning management systems, and there's a lot of debate over if the LMSs will still exist or not because of the open AIs and whatnot. And for the record, I think they will. It'll just look a little different. But what we do is really the back office stuff. How do we say right, yes, and to the right focus areas and highest priorities, which we talked about earlier, and say no to the things that will have the least impact. So we give visibility into strategic business alignment to help with what to say yes to,
Mhm.
and prioritize. We help teams do planning up front on what success looks like if they choose to start investing time and money into a program to solve a business issue. How do we plan for success so that we can execute with more precision and operational excellence? We help them forecast time and money, so capacity and budgets, We help them execute programs and tasks to get to the solutions that they need. And then we help them measure the programs if they're working or not, and if they're making money or losing money. So that's how
So,
we define operations.
okay, so tell me where AI fits into that.
So if you think about all of that, it's in reality without LearnOps, you're using disparate systems and tools for each part of those things.
Uh, uh,
LearnOps brings together these disparate workflows into one purpose-built operating system. By default, you automatically get better structured data and more connected workflows, which actually makes it easier to have end-to-end AI operators on top of learning operations. Without it, you're still using disparate IT tools or sometimes Excel spreadsheets for some of the processes, which actually makes it impossible to have end-to-end AI strategy. You might have pockets of AI. I use AI to author content. I have AI in my learning management system. I can use OpenAI for with Coursera, which I think is what you were talking about. But that doesn't mean that you have an end-to-end AI strategy on running your business function. And the CFO office is asking learning, talent, and HR people to do that. And they don't have mature operations, they don't have structured data to do it. So it's an amazing opportunity for Cognota to actually be the operating system that helps these people functions to operate at scale using AI and to do more with less since they're going to have limited budget.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Ryan, we are out of time today. So please tell the audience how they can reach you.
Yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. We also, for learning professionals that are looking for support in this, we have a free community at learnops.com. And if you're looking at transitioning into learning and development or looking for a new role, we sponsor a free job board at learnops360.com as well. And naturally, if you're looking for LearnOps software, you could find us at cognota.com, just like how it's spelled here.
Love it. Love it. Ryan, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
That's a wrap for today's episode of The Scaling CEO. If you found this valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with a fellow CEO who could benefit. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a quick rating as it really helps more people find the show. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. See you next time for more proven strategies to grow your business and leadership.